I'll stop there, but just one final reflection. That's something I've learned on this trip. This has been physically the toughest mission I've done this week, and I've seen really close up how tough these access challenges really are. Just, I wanted to get up that road to show that it could be done and show that we needed to get our convoys moving up that road. But it's a brutal 2 to 3 day journey. Along the way, another UN convoy that was following us, a UNICEF convoy, was caught up in an airstrike on a commercial vehicle, and colleagues were shaken up and injured in that. On the way back, we were caught up in a huge forest fire, which was a pretty dicey moment. One of our vehicles had a crash, and of course, we're going through checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint, manned by these different military groups. I say manned. In many cases, these are not men on the checkpoints, they're kids. And, that constant reminder of the dangers that our teams face and the risks we run. But as I say, we're going to get that blue flag flying as close as possible to the people we serve. And this mission, that was our number one objective. Thanks, Steph. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Ibtisam, then Gabriel, then Deji.
Hi, thank you for the briefing in the name of the UN Correspondent Association. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. So my first question is about, or a few follow-ups to things you said. You talked about that we need more UN boots on the ground. Could you elaborate? What do you mean by that exactly? And then you said that you met General Burhan and representative RSF. Do you mean Hamaditi, General Hamaditi, and how did these talks go? I mean, you have promises, but is there any guarantees from international parties who can put more pressure on them to get more aid? And the last one regarding the Security Council. Do you believe that there should be an arms embargo on Sudan? Thank you. On all parties. Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, Ibtisam. Thanks, Steph. So I felt since going just under a year ago, my first week in the job, that we do need this more visible presence for UN humanitarians inside Darfur. We've had all sorts of challenges getting people into Darfur and more widely across Sudan in the numbers that they are needed. I want that presence really for 3 reasons. Firstly, because it's a form of protection. Civilians and survivors tell us that when they see us there, they feel safer. They feel less at risk from retaliation and from this conflict spreading towards Tawila, for example, which would be catastrophic. Also to make sure that we're negotiating the access we need for our convoys and working with our NGO colleagues who are such a key part of this effort. I mentioned NRC and SAVE, but there are many other key partners operating on the ground, and also then to make sure that we're getting the delivery right. Because of the aid cuts, we're having to hyper-prioritize the work we do, and that means we need those people on the ground really making sure that aid gets where it's needed. On the contacts with the RSF, I had a call with Hamaditi a couple of weeks ago as part of the preparations for this surge of aid that we want to see and this surge of engagement. I met on the ground just local representatives of the RSF. I think that they certainly heard from me this pressure for us to have complete unhindered access, safe passage, and for the atrocities to stop and for accountability. That's a conversation I've been having with the senior civilian official as well throughout of the RSF throughout this visit and in advance of this visit. But as you say, we do need that sustained international pressure. We're seeing it. Secretary Rubio has been very clear in recent days on this. We're seeing it from across the region as well on all the parties to give us that humanitarian access and to bring this conflict to an end. On the arms embargo, I'll hand that one back to Steph. I think he'll have a wiser answer than I do, but I would be straying outside my humanitarian lane, which, as Steph knows, I'm very diligent about not stepping outside of ever. And so with gratitude to him, I'll let him tell you our view on that.
You are a diplomat, Tom. Very good. I'll answer that later. Gabriel?
Hello, Mr. Fletcher. This is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. Thanks for the briefing. And we took note of all your social media content while you were in Sudan and still are there. It was quite helpful to get a sense of what you're seeing and hearing on the ground. Two quick questions. One is, you said you had, in your words, tough discussions with the RSF, but then you said you have reached some sort of agreement for full access and safe passage. Full access and safe passage mean different things to different people. Can you explain your understanding of what it means, what you think coming out of that meeting, full access means between you and the RSF? And second question is, El Fasher, you described it as a crime scene. We don't know how many people are left even in El Fasher to get humanitarian aid. What is your thinking in terms of trying to get in there, and when and how, and would it even be a humanitarian mission at this point? Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel, and great questions. So I know what we mean by full access, and those were the commitments I was seeking from the RSF and actually from other parties on the ground, that we get unhindered access to people on the basis of need, and that this is never politicized. That we don't go in, of course, with any military accompaniments and so on. That we are going in under our own steam, aligned with the principles of neutrality and independence and impartiality. Safe passage means that our UN humanitarians and the humanitarian community more widely, the NGOs too, are able to get up and down those roads, Tawila to Korma into Al Fasher, and to work in Al Fasher without these threats of drones, of airstrikes, of violence from parties on the ground. We, as you often hear me say, last year was the deadliest year to be a humanitarian worker, and Sudan was right up there, I think number 2 on that list, and it's not a great list to be near the top of. In terms of when we get into Al Fasher, I wouldn't want to put a deadline on it, because we want to test our conditions and make sure we're confident that they will be met. But my hope is that this is the work of days and maybe weeks and not of months. We need to get in absolutely urgently. And as you suggest, of course, from my perspective, we want to get the humanitarian convoys on the road. But other parts of the UN, Volker Turk has been very clear on this in his briefings, will also want to get people in to investigate what's happened and to bear witness to what has happened. And so that will be a key part of the conversation about who goes in when and in what order. Thank you.
This is Zina from the IM and Free News. So you said international, you are calling for more international pressure. What's the role of the UN to make it true and real? And what's the use of the humanitarian aid if the conflict doesn't stop?
Yeah, I think that's a... Oh, have I lost you, Gina? Did you have more, Zina?
Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, we need that sustained international pressure. This has been my key message really to the member states and the Security Council. I think we are seeing more of that now, but with the emergence of the Quad and the substantive work that they've been doing, of course, the work that Special Envoy Lamamra is leading as well. We need just that sustained pressure on all the actors to demonstrate that this has gone on too long, and that the methods of war, the level of impunity around this conflict is utterly unacceptable. Zina, sorry, you cut out. I missed the second half of your question.
What's the use of the call of on more passage of the humanitarian aid if the conflict doesn't stop itself? How you are acting as the United Nations to make it true and stop this conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a key question. We can't just be endlessly the sticking plaster that's responding to a conflict that shouldn't be so hard to stop. I know how complex it is, that the politics around this are fiendishly difficult, the regional dynamics. But as I said to the Security Council the other day, they've got to compare themselves to previous generations of security councils, previous generations of diplomats, future generations of diplomats. Would they have found it so difficult to end this conflict? And I know that so many people, including our colleague, Mr. Lamamra, are working incredibly hard on that. But this, I feel this everywhere. This is a factor of our work globally right now, that we humanitarians, we're the ambulance that goes into these crises to try and help the survivors. But effectively now, in the absence of sustained international engagement, the world is also then saying to us, could you also be the firemen, the fire people, and put out the fire as well? But it's doing that while saying, but by the way, we're not going to put much water in your fire engine, and the fire engine will get shot at as it heads out towards those survivors and civilians. So this is getting really, really hard. And humanitarians are getting pulled into political situations and processes that aren't our core business. We are meant to be the ambulance. We're not meant to be the ones putting the fire out.
Dulcie, and then Deji, and then...
Hi, this is Dulcie Lineback from Pass Blue. I wondered if you saw in your travels the emergency response rooms. Are they still operating in Darfur? Thanks.
Yeah, great people, great colleagues, and I was there. I went to see them in Korma, and just incredibly courageous colleagues doing vital work. It's a reminder that because it's been so difficult often for the international community to really engage on the ground as close as we should be to those we serve, the real front line of this effort is those national community-based NGOs. And one of my objectives as ERC is to ensure that we are getting half of our funding through our pooled funds to national NGOs, local NGOs, because we really have to, this is such a tough time for the community as a whole, but we have to make sure that those people on the front line are getting the financial support that they need.
Thank you, Tom. Just two questions on statistics. You said 1 in 5, I believe you said 1 in 5 people killed is a child. How did you arrive at that figure? I mean, it's a messy conflict. How do we know for sure? And secondly, over the past few weeks, have we seen the number of deaths and wounded rise significantly? Do we have a number to put on that? Thank you.
It's a fair question. I mean, I think no one can really say with much authority exactly how many people have been killed and exactly how many have been displaced. It's clear from me, you've got hundreds of thousands in Tawila, and we know that in the last 2 weeks, tens of thousands more have been arriving, but it's very, very hard to put a number on that. And to be clear, as I think Iftisam touched on earlier on, many people clearly aren't getting out of Al-Fasher. And one of the things we want to do when we go in is to find out why that is, and to see what the conditions are in which they're being held there. On the 1 in 5 stat, this I think we'd be able to check this for you. I don't know off the top of my head. I think this was a UNICEF stat that I got for my Security Council briefing a couple of weeks ago. On the numbers killed, I couldn't give you a credible answer. I would just be guessing. But I think I do encourage you to have a look at some of the work done by the Yale lab with the satellite footage and so on, which is at the moment, alongside the testimonies of the survivors, our best guide. All I can say is that everyone I spoke to in Tawila had lost close relatives. So the numbers are clearly huge.
Deji, then Stefano.
Hi, Mr. Fletcher. This is Xu Dezhi with China Central Television. You just mentioned that there is a surge of UN staff to 28. Are those international staff? You just said that the meeting between you and ISF representatives is very tough, but you yet have increased the UN staff number there. Does that mean you are expecting more humanitarian operation access in Darfur? Thank you.
So the 28 staff that I met yesterday before leaving, the day before leaving Tawila, are a mixture of national and international. We've increased both international and national. And by the way, from my perspective, leading this organization, I don't see the difference. These are all our kind of frontline colleagues, and they're doing extraordinary work. Many of them, as I say, are from areas, are themselves displaced by this conflict. And yeah, I think the surge of staff into Darfur is a recognition of the scale of the need, but also our determination that we will get access to areas that we haven't previously had access to, haven't had permission to get access to. And it's my job and the job of our outstanding humanitarian coordinator, Denise Brown, and the team to be working flat out on those access issues. It's one of the most complex places to get access to those we need to reach, but we're determined to do it.
Stefano?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. About 2 weeks ago, you were at the Security Council. You said that Sudan represents a failure of protection. With the aid blocked and civilians dying, isn't it time to acknowledge the humanitarian appeals are no longer enough? Should the international community move toward responsibility to protect? And if not now, when?
I think that's a very fair question, Stefano. I think we're clearly seeing that the humanitarian appeals are, 32% funded, clearly not going to be enough to even begin to meet these massive needs. I'm sure there's a more official answer, but I personally have always been a big fan of responsibility to protect. But ultimately, this is a challenge for the international community and for the member states. I don't have the means to go in there and protect civilians from what is happening to them. It's the Security Council and the international community that's going to have to do its work on that.
I understand, just a quick follow-up. I understand, of course you don't, and also the Secretary General doesn't, but you have a voice. And at this point, when you ask for help, humanitarian help, we need access, all this, I think, is a distraction, because at this point, the people don't need, yes, they're starving, but before starvation, they need blue helmet on the field to protect them. Everything else is something that comes after, because they're dying. You can't feed a person that is dead.
I completely understand the question, Stefan. And I take your point, but I'm not going to somehow stop humanitarian operations and let more people die while I wait for member states, international community to think about blue helmets or other ways of stopping this conflict. I have to deal with the reality on the ground as we find it, and that means we'll save as many lives as we can in the conditions in which we're allowed to operate. Now, I desperately hope that those conditions get better and that there is that sustained international engagement to end this conflict, open up humanitarian space. I can't, and the people that we're here to serve can't wait for that.
Thank you. One last question, Zainab, please.
It's follow-up question. You mentioned flow of arms, and we believe that there are major forces, foreign forces, who are feeding these arms. Did you, as representative of the UN, suggest any sanctions on both parties to stop or the major forces who are feeding them arms?
Look, I'm clear from my first visit, but also particularly from this visit, the last thing Sudan needs right now is more guns and bullets. It needs aid and protection for the survivors. So I do think that we should have full accountability. There should be accountability for the people firing the weapons. There should be accountability for the people giving the orders. And those providing the weapons need to take a long look at themselves in the mirror. A long look at themselves in the mirror and start to act responsibly.
Did you suggest any sanctions, you as a representative of the UN?
No, that's outside my my pure humanitarian furrow that I'm very keen to stay in.
Great. On that note, Tom, thank you. We know you've had a grueling week, if not more. We wish you all the best, and thank you really for taking the time out for briefing us. And again, just a reminder, Tom was speaking to us from Adre, the crossing between Chad and Sudan. And Tom, we wish you safe travels and see you back in person very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you, colleagues. See you soon.
Great, thank you. And just to note, we shared with you, we should be sharing with you shortly by email a link to a lot of the video that was made available by Tom over the last week, so to help you with your coverage. Just to note that we have a senior personnel appointment today, which is not a surprise, as it's been hinted, but it is now official. Today, the Secretary General, following consultations with the Executive Board of the UN Development Program, wrote to the President of the General Assembly requesting the General Assembly to confirm Alexander De Croo of Belgium as the new administrator of UNDP for a term of 4 years. The General Assembly confirmed the nomination today. Mr. De Croo succeeds Achim Steiner of Germany, to whom the Secretary General is grateful for his leadership and commitment to the organization. He also wishes to express his appreciation to Hao Yongshu, Associate Administrator of UNDP, who's been handling the interim and will continue to do so until Mr. De Croo's arrival. Just as background, Mr. De Croo has dedicated much of his career to public service, advancing global solidarity, combining political leadership, development cooperation, innovation. As former Prime Minister of Belgium from 2020 to 2025, he worked closely with multilateral institutions to steer structural changes for people in some of the world's most vulnerable regions, having consistently supported UNDP as a key partner, and we welcome Mr. De Croo to the UN family. As far as the Secretary General, he just arrived in Belém in Brazil a few hours ago, where, as you all know, COP30 is currently underway. As I told you last week, during the first few days, he will be meeting with negotiating parties, including various regional groups and ministers. He will also engage with civil society representatives and indigenous peoples and youth, and we will update you on his program as it goes along. Turning to the situation in Gaza, our colleagues with the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warn that the humanitarian situation remains very difficult, with many people struggling to access the basics they need to survive. Following heavy rains on Friday, humanitarian teams carried out a rapid assessment of impacted areas over the weekend and provided some initial aid. More than 13,000 families are estimated to have been impacted by the flooding. According to our partners working on shelter over the weekend, they helped distribute at least 9,000 tents, 83,000 tarpaulins, and 59,000 blankets, with thousands more planned in the coming days. While we and our partners have moved swiftly to respond to rain-affected areas, our efforts remain constrained by inadequate volume of shelter and other necessary supplies allowed to enter through the UN coordinated mechanism. With temperatures dropping and winter fast approaching, we must be allowed to expand the shelter response to meet the vast scale of needs across the Gaza Strip. We continue to call for unrestricted, for rapid and sustained access, the opening of additional crossings, facilitation of entry of tents that are currently restricted, as well as critical equipment to maintain storm drains and repair sanitation networks, permission for NGOs to bring in supplies, and the safe movement of humanitarian convoys. Since October 10th, at least 9 attempts by the United Nations and our partners to bring in tents have been rejected. Our partners working on food security report that with the volume of food parcels entering Gaza having increased in recent days, they plan to resume the distribution of 2 food parcels and 1 bag of flour across the Strip. Earlier this last week, distribution in the north had to be limited to high-energy biscuits and 1 bag of flour because partners working in to bring supplies were facing impediments, including the deprioritization of humanitarian cargo at crossings, customs clearance delays, and lack of access to northern crossings. Meanwhile, our colleagues working on efforts to remove rubble and debris from roads and communities tell us they've cleared 100,000 tons of debris since the ceasefire came into effect. However, nearly 58 million tons of debris and rubble remain spread across the Gaza Strip, and only half of that amount is currently accessible. We and our partners continue to collect supplies daily from crossings. Over the weekend, we and those who are working with us started collecting supplies that had been offloaded at the Zikim crossing, and we're bringing them into Gaza. This is after 2 months when that crossing had been closed. Our teams collect over 2,700 pallets of essential supplies. That's about 2,600 metric tons. Overall, between Thursday and Sunday, we and our partners collected over 5,400 metric tons of assistance from the crossings. That's what the UN 2720 mechanism dashboard is telling us. Supplies included food tents, tarpaulins, blankets, mattresses, and animal fodder. Moving north to the latest developments in southern Lebanon, I can tell you that the Secretary General is indeed deeply concerned by the increased frequency of incidents impacting the safety and security of our peacekeepers in Lebanon. Yesterday, an Israeli tank near one of the IDF positions located north of the Blue Line opened fire towards northeast of Sadra in Sector East. Rounds of fire hit approximately 5 meters from our peacekeepers who were in the vicinity. UNIFIL requested the IDF to stop the firing immediately through our liaison channels. Thankfully, no UNIFIL personnel were injured. The Secretary General reminds all parties of their obligations to ensure the protection of UN personnel and property. Peacekeepers must never be targeted by attacks. And in a separate incident also yesterday, a drone fell inside a UN position southeast of Marwahin in Sector West. A grenade was discovered beneath the drone and detonated by our explosive ordnance disposal team. Our peacekeeping colleagues are trying to determine the origin of the drone. Also yesterday, a UNIFIL radar detected 2 separate shelling events where a total of 4 120 millimeter short mortar shells impacted northwest of Sadra and Sector East. All shells were fired from south to the north of the Blue Line. Meanwhile, UNIFIL peacekeepers continue to discover unauthorized weapons caches as well as unexploded ordnance in their area of operation. Yesterday, peacekeepers found a rocket-propelled grenade and ammunition in the vicinity of a 50-meter-long tunnel northwest of Frun in Sector East. UNIFIL marked the area, and as they do, they informed the Lebanese armed forces about their find for disposal. Back here, the Security Council is holding an open debate today on conflict-related food insecurity, a critical issue. Just in the past year, the Famine Review Committee has confirmed famine on 3 separate occasions, twice in Sudan and once in Gaza. This marks the first time that conflict-driven famine has been confirmed more than once in a single year. Briefing the Council, our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, emphasized that war and hunger are intertwined, with starvation increasingly used as a weapon. She noted that while global military spending reached $21.9 trillion over the past decades, ending hunger by 2030 would cost $93 billion. For her part, Joyce Masuya, our Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, urged Council members to use their leverage to address hunger and conflict, calling for stronger policies and practices to protect civilians and facilitating humanitarian action. Maximo Torero, the chief economist of the Food and Agriculture Organization, told the Council that food insecurity is no longer just a humanitarian challenge, but a matter of global peace and security, waiting for famine to occur before acting and before it is too late. Turning to Ukraine, our OCHA colleagues report that hostilities over the weekend caused dozens of civilian casualties and further disrupted critical services amid cold weather. According to authorities, widespread attacks between Saturday and this morning killed at least a dozen civilians and injured more than 60, including 5 children. In the town of Balaklia in the Kharkiv region, a missile strike killed 3 civilians and injured 15 more, among them 5 girls. Additional casualties were reported in Chernihiv, Dnipro, Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kherson, Sumy, and Zaporizhzhia. Humanitarian organizations responded immediately after a deadly attack in Balaklia, where they delivered bottled water, snacks, hygiene items, blankets, and construction material, and also offered mental health support. Authorities and our partners report that residential buildings and critical infrastructure were damaged along the front line. In the region of Odessa, a drone attack left more than 30,000 households without electricity, while strike in the Chernihiv region disrupted power in several communities. Scheduled power outages continued across much of Ukraine following recent attacks. Power disruptions remain particularly severe near the front lines, where our partners report that nearly 70% of locations they've assessed or face frequent or prolonged outages, while some have no electricity at all. These outages continue to affect the water supply, heating, and telecommunications, with direct consequences, as one can imagine, on civilians and our humanitarian operations. Meanwhile, OCHA says that evacuations from frontline areas continued over the weekend. And a quick update from our peacekeepers in Abyei. The UN Interim Security Force for Abyei, UNISFA, reports it's completed repairs on maintenance on the Banton Bridge over the River Kir. This bridge is a vital link between Abyei's central and southern villages and an important route for trade with South Sudan. The bridge had been unsafe for months, restricting civilian movement, access, and the patrols of our peacekeepers. Separately, UN peacekeepers also cleared a route from the northern checkpoint to Amiet Market by removing stranded vehicles and repairing rain-damaged road sections. You will have seen the Security Council on Friday extended the mandate of the peacekeeping force for another year. And while Hurricane Melissa has moved on, we're starting to uncover even more lasting consequences. Our colleagues at UNICEF tell us that 3 weeks after the storm hit the Caribbean, nearly 477,000 children are experiencing significant disruptions in their schoolings. That's in Cuba, Haiti, and Jamaica. With many schools damaged or closed, children have been forced to miss classes or study temporary spaces that may not be equipped for proper learning. In response, UNICEF, working with local governments and partners, are delivering supplies and are trying to rehabilitate damaged schools. In Cuba, UNICEF has pre-positioned supplies to reach 21,000 students, including school kits. They're also supporting efforts for rehabilitation there. And in Haiti, UNICEF provided 2,800 school kits in South and NIPS departments, and additional actions are planned in the coming weeks. And in Jamaica, the agency has provided teaching and learning material along with up to 100 temporary learning spaces to support 10,000 children. Our colleagues call on donors to protect education by mobilizing money to address the most urgent of the children's needs. More details online. Just to flag that at 1:15 this afternoon, the Deputy Secretary General will be one of the speakers at the dedication of the Flowers of Srebrenica Memorial just outside the building in the garden overlooking the East River. You're all invited to attend. Bosnia and Herzegovina donated the Flower of Srebrenica Memorial to the Secretariat earlier this year as part of the Srebrenica Genocide and UN Outreach Program. The permanent memorial forms an integral part of the Srebrenica Genocide and UN Outreach Program, which engages visitors in